In the heart of the Cold War, while the world teetered on the edge of nuclear annihilation, one Soviet officer made a split-second decision that would alter the course of human history forever. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, facing flashing screens and blaring alarms indicating an American nuclear attack, chose to trust his intuition rather than his equipment, a fateful mistake according to Soviet protocol. What followed in those tense minutes would remain classified for decades, with the breathtaking truth finally emerging long after the Cold War had ended. But the most chilling revelation is how close we truly came to extinction that night, and the stunning twist that explains why this hero was initially punished rather than celebrated. And Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, carried the weight of this responsibility on his shoulders. Stationed at Serpukhov 15, a secret command center outside Moscow, Petrov monitored the Soviet early warning system. His job was to watch for signs of an American nuclear attack and to relay that information to his superiors. The fate of the Soviet Union, and perhaps the world, rested on his vigilance. Petrov was a dedicated officer. He understood the gravity of his task. Every day, he scrutinized the data flowing across his screens, searching for any anomaly that could signal the launch of American missiles. The pressure was immense. One mistake, one misinterpretation, could have unimaginable consequences. The early warning system, while technologically advanced for its time, was not foolproof. Glitches and false alarms were not uncommon. Petrov and his team were trained to distinguish between genuine threats and technical malfunctions. But in the heat of the moment, with the world on the brink, making the right call could feel like an impossible burden. Petrov never imagined that he would become the single point of failure, the one man standing between the world and nuclear war. But on September 26, 1983, the unthinkable happened. The sirens blared, the screens flashed red. The unthinkable was now a terrifying reality. The Serpukhov 15 bunker was a hive of activity. Technicians scurried between consoles, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of computer screens. The air crackled with tension. Petrov sat before his monitor, his eyes fixed on the incoming data. The early warning system was reporting the unthinkable, an American nuclear attack. One by one, the system registered multiple launches. American intercontinental ballistic missiles, armed with nuclear warheads, were streaking across the Arctic. Every alarm bell in the bunker was screaming. Petrov's training told him to report the attack immediately. To hesitate could mean the annihilation of the Soviet Union. His hand hovered over the button that would trigger the Soviet counter-attack. The room seemed to shrink around him. The weight of millions of lives pressed down on his shoulders. The fate of the world hung in the balance, but something didn't feel right. The number of missiles seemed too small for a full-scale American first strike, and there was something off about the trajectory. His gut instinct, honed by years of experience, whispered a warning. Could this be a false alarm? Petrov's mind raced. He questioned the data. He demanded confirmation from his team. But the system was unwavering. It continued to report incoming missiles. The pressure to act was unbearable. His superiors were demanding answers. Every second counted. He thought about his family, his friends, the millions of innocent people who would be vaporized in an instant. He thought about the future that would be lost, the dreams that would turn to ash. Could he live with himself if he triggered a nuclear holocaust based on faulty information? His gut feeling told him to wait. He needed more information. He needed to trust his instincts. In a decision that defied logic and protocol, Petrov chose to do nothing. He would not be the one to start World War III. He reported the alarm to his superiors, but he labeled it a false alarm. He staked his career, his reputation, and perhaps his life on a hunch. His decision went against everything he had been trained to do. It went against every instinct for self-preservation, but deep down, he knew it was the right thing to do. Section 5. Petrov's Gamble. The minutes that followed were the longest of Petrov's life. The sirens continued to wail, the screens continued to flash. The threat of annihilation hung heavy in the air, but Petrov held firm. He waited for confirmation, for the other shoe to drop. Time seemed to stand still. Then, slowly, the tension began to dissipate. The missiles did not arrive. The world did not end. Petrov's gamble had paid off. He had saved the world from a nuclear holocaust. The relief in the bunker was palpable. The tension drained away, replaced by a wave of exhaustion and disbelief. Petrov had made the impossible choice, and he had made the right one. But his ordeal was far from over. The consequences of his actions were still unknown. Had he disobeyed orders? Had he jeopardized the security of the Soviet Union? The answers to these questions would have to wait. For now, all that mattered was that the world was still intact. In the immediate aftermath, there was no fanfare, no recognition of Petrov's heroism. The incident remained a closely guarded secret. The Soviet Union, built on an image of infallibility, was not eager to admit that its early warning system was flawed. Petrov was ordered to remain silent about what had happened. He returned to his life, carrying the weight of his secret. The world continued to spin, oblivious to the disaster that had been narrowly averted. But for Petrov, the memory of that night, the burden of his decision, never faded. He knew that his actions had been unorthodox, perhaps even bordering on insubordination. But he also knew that he had done the right thing. He had followed his instincts, his gut feeling, and, in doing so, he had saved countless lives. The silence surrounding the event was deafening. Petrov received no commendation, no recognition for his bravery. Instead, he was quietly reassigned and later forced into early retirement. The Soviet system, it seemed, was more concerned with saving face than with acknowledging the truth. For years, Petrov lived with the knowledge of what he had done, his secret eating away at him. The world remained oblivious, none the wiser about the nuclear dance they had escaped. The Cold War continued, the threat of annihilation still looming large. The burden of his secret took a toll on Petrov's health. He suffered a nervous breakdown and his marriage fell apart. The weight of the world, it seemed, was a heavy burden to bear alone. But Petrov never regretted his decision. He knew that he had done what he had to do. He had followed his conscience and prevented a catastrophe. He was a true hero, even if no one knew it yet. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 finally allowed Petrov's story to emerge from the shadows. The declassification of Soviet archives revealed the truth about the events of September 26, 1983. The world finally learned about the man who had saved them from themselves. When Petrov's story finally came to light, it was met with a mixture of disbelief and admiration. The world struggled to comprehend how close it had come to destruction, and how one man's courage had made all the difference. Accolades and awards poured in. Petrov, the once forgotten lieutenant colonel, became an international hero. He was lauded for his clear thinking, his bravery, and his unwavering commitment to peace. He traveled the world, sharing his story and advocating for nuclear disarmament. He met with world leaders, urging them to learn from the mistakes of the past and to work towards a safer future. Despite the recognition, Petrov remained humble. He never sought fame or fortune. He was simply a man who had done his duty, a quiet hero who had saved the world from itself. Stanislav Petrov's story is a powerful reminder of the fragility of peace and the importance of human judgment. In a world dominated by technology, it was a human being, relying on his instincts and his conscience, who averted disaster. Petrov's legacy is one of hope and inspiration. It is a testament to the power of one person to make a difference. His story teaches us that even in the darkest of times, even when all hope seems lost, there is always room for courage, for compassion, and for peace. The man who was initially punished for his heroism eventually received the recognition he deserved, but more importantly, he left behind a legacy that continues to inspire the world. Stanislav Petrov, the man who saved the world, showed us that even in the face of unimaginable pressure, one person can make a difference.